Arthur and Zach. Good.
All right.
Second.
Welcome to our December meeting, which I am playfully calling a Star Wars Holiday Spectacular. So, for those of you just joining us or been here for a while, this is our 6-month anniversary. So we've been doing this meeting for 6 months, and I don't know about you, but I'm pretty proud of the fact that we've been consistently coming out and putting up pretty decent numbers for these meetings. So thank you all, and we have a little contest planned for later on. We have some prizes in the back here that we'll be handing out. So we'll be doing a trivia contest to see who wins. So and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But let's move on. We'll go right into what's new. So there's another Deploy Studio update. We're going to talk about the El Capitan update that came up, and a brief about the iOS, watchOS, and tvOS updates, and the Office 2016 update, and probably the big news is that MacKeeper breach that was recently broke. So we'll talk about all that stuff as well. So first up, Deploy Studio. It's just really brief. Deploy Studio 1.7 dropped support for 10.6 server. So if any of you are using Deploy Studio and are still using 10.6 server, stop. It's time to move on. So also, so we had this last week when we had talk about Deploy Studio. Another plug for Imager. That's getting much more rapid development these days, and it seems to be more robust. So consider that as an alternative to Deploy Studio. And what disappeared anyway. So we're talking about El Capitan. So the El Capitan 10.11.2 update fixes the evil triangle update problem that was happening there, and it just went right out of my head what that was. But it introduces a new problem, which is especially concerned for people who use Monkey and Simian. In that the 10.2 update blows out everything in var db receipts, which I know Monkey and Simian rely heavily on that database and the contents therein to do things like make sure that everything is up to date and don't reinstall things that have already been installed. The particular seems to be if you go from like Yosemite to 10.11.2 directly, that the var db receipts gets blown out. People have said that going from, if you're already on El Capitan and going to 10.11.2, that doesn't happen. And I think was it TD Sutton said that it didn't happen when he went from Mavericks to 10.11.2. Interesting. So, but that's just one anecdotal. So I would test before you do anything like that. But yes, so going from, if you're already on El Capitan, you still retain the var db receipts. And what a lot of people have been doing is going for the 10.11.0 or the 10.11.1 installer, and then applying the 10.11.2 update so they don't lose that. There is I know Mike submitted a radar, but there's also another radar. I have a link posted on the slides, so when you get the slides, if you want to check that out. It's always good practice if someone has posted radar, just go ahead and duplicate it, because it'll get closed as a duplicate, but they'll track it. Because if the more people who file radars and say this is a problem, the more Apple will take a look at it and try to address it. The sooner Apple will try to address it. At least that's what the Apple people have told me. So Okay, what's next? Oh yes, and there's lots of security updates, and some of those security updates also apply for Yosemite and Mavericks. Even though Mavericks is now officially in, we kind of sort of will do a couple of updates here and there for whatever. But there are some very important updates for security updates for Mavericks. So if you have any Mavericks clients, make sure they're on 10.9.5. If your 70 clients, also go to 10.10.5 and apply these updates as well. Okay, and iOS, tvOS, watchOS updates. So 9.2 came out and addressed a whole bunch of patches and fixes, and as you can see, they closed a lot of holes in there. What they did do, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but there's been a reported issue with 9.2 where managed devices are unable to download from either the managed app store or for the regular app store. We've seen this happen on a few of our devices, but it's been widely reported, so I'm not sure about the rest of you, but a lot of us are holding off on 9.2. Yes.
There's an Apple K-based article where they mention that it's an issue with how the 9.2 device assignment stuff has been implemented. So I guess, I don't know if Jim needs to change the way they implemented that in Casper or not. It looks like it's an issue with when the MDM requests a list of apps that have been installed before it's finished installing.
Well, I know also it doesn't affect just Casper. I know it affects AirWatch as well, because that's where we've been seeing it too. So it looks like patches will probably have to come from our MDM vendors rather than from Apple. So
Apple's still issuing a patch to address the behavior, but they recommend that the vendors also do. So.
Okay, so yeah, so eventually we'll get like a 9.2.1, which we'll fix that. But for now, if you see that issue, just make sure. We've been telling people not to install 9.2 on their devices until this is resolved. So if you guys can do that, that's what I would recommend as well.
Yeah.
So
mobile iron is affected as well.
Yeah. So yeah, so pretty much most of the MDM vendors. So.
Yeah, and also the 9.2.1 first 9.2.1 beta just shipped yesterday, I think.
Okay. So if you guys have access to developer.apple.com and want to make sure that that's been resolved, go in, get that patch, and see and test it.
By the way, Casper 9.8.2 was just released this afternoon, but does not address the issue.
Correct. tvOS 9.1 for iOS and Apple. The remote app is new for iOS and Apple Watch, and also you get Siri for Apple Music. And see, they fixed a lot of bugs too. Most of the bugs are actually on tvOS are pretty much duplicates of the one that are on iOS, because obviously they share the same code base.
At home, I have seen decreased AirPlay performance after that update. I do not know if that is a widespread thing, but I can't AirPlay anymore. That could also just be AirPlay. But I have found the new Apple TVs have performed better in general.
Overall?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the update happened and now I can't do it anymore.
But you can't AirPlay to yours?
Not from my Apple TV at home, no.
The new one?
Nope.
I have no issue. I used it last night, and we have the new Apple TV too. I just applied the update for the remote app support.
Yeah.
It didn't.
It's just something that I experienced, so I don't know if it's widespread or not, but keep an eye out for it.
Yes.
Check the logs.
So watchOS 2.1 adds additional language supports, like languages I don't think anybody here speaks, but they're important anyway. Bug fixes and more holes closed. So, and of course, Safari and Xcode were also updated recently. So Safari 9.02, which is available for the last 3 operating systems, at least the most recent versions of the last 2. And there is a big memory corruption hole that got patched. So if you guys are running Safari 902 on your machines, make sure that you get those machines get those patches sooner rather than later. And Xcode was also patched. There's additions to Linker and Swift, and they closed in some vulnerabilities with Git, IDEs, SCM, and OTools. If any of your developers have Xcode, make sure they get this update as well, too. So, yeah, that's that. Yes?
I've just remembered, Swift was made open source.
Yes, Swift was made open source.
With code released for Linux as well.
Yep. So if anybody's been playing around with Swift, you can now play around with something other than OS 10 and Xcode.
I believe, did IBM release a Swift Playground as well? Virtualized system port?
It sounds like there might be a Windows version of Swift as well.
Yeah, it's static.
Well, if there's not, there should be one coming. So
Yeah,
we'll probably see playgrounds for everything very shortly.
Yeah, they said it was community support at first to gauge interest.
Right. So more Office 2016 updates. 15.17 was just released, I think late last week. So there's lots of fixes to Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the usual suspects. There's a link to Microsoft's page that I have on here, so when you get the slides, you can just click there and read all the details. So the 15.17 introduced a resizing issue in Outlook, in which basically it doesn't. Like you move it around and then it gets stuck at some points, and you basically have to quit out, close the window, quit out, relaunch, do a new window, and then it opens up to the default size, and then you can try and move it again. So that it's I think particularly if you have the reading pane on the right, if you set it up for that, that's usually the culprit. But there's a patch. Paul Bowden from Microsoft was on the Slack channel today saying that they released the patch in beta, a beta of the patch this afternoon. So people who have access to the MacAdmin.software channel can get that patch and start testing. I think he said he wanted to release it tomorrow officially, but so they wanted to get confirmation that it actually works. So yeah, if you have a chance tonight, do that. Otherwise, wait for the official patch, which I think will be 15.17.1, which will probably go live tomorrow or Monday at the latest. So also, the new volume licenser will officially be part of the volume license 15.17 release, which will be next month. So does anybody know what's going on with that?
Kind of do.
Not know? You don't know?
Oh, I do. Sorry, I thought I said
not.
not.
I said you not know.
Sorry.
So just in brief, the new volume licenser is basically came about from the interaction on the Microsoft Office channel in the MacAdmins Slack, where basically we were bitching about how the original installer, that volume license installer that Microsoft gave us, only worked if you used it while logged in as a user. So, which, yes, it was like bad practice everywhere, and a lot of the guys looked into the actual package and pulled apart and looked at scripts and see like all bad practices everywhere. So, and what came out of that is that we had Paul Bowden come on the MacAdmins Microsoft Slack channel and basically said, give me all your feedback, I'm going to go back, and the new volume license installer for 15.17 is a result of that feedback. So that license installer, when it comes out, will work pretty much when nobody's logged in, or when you're at the login screen, or it's been pushed out by root. So it should fix all those problems. And he also introduced something called the volume licenser. So there's currently a bug in the volume license as it stands, where you can copy the plist, the licensing plist, from one machine to the other. That's a bug currently, and as far as Paul is concerned, they're going to be closing that bug as of 15.20. So in advance of that, in order to do things like if Office loses its licenses for whatever reason, or somebody has an O365 account, downloads Office and wants to use it on work, and you just want to license them so they count against your license and don't go through O365, this tool will basically license that copy of Office for you correctly, the way Microsoft wants it to work. So they encourage you to use that. It's a package that you just click and run, and we'll just do all the work for you. So that's coming in January. So anybody who has the volume license agreement with Microsoft, get the new volume licenser when that released in January, and then you should be good to go from that point on. So also, what he did mention was they're working on a method for you to manage the Microsoft Auto Updater tool. So basically what's going to happen is, what he wants to happen is basically write to a plist, and you tell it what are the current versions for your organization. So it only offers that latest version that you've set on those machines for that. And then so when you're done testing, then you can go in, update the plist, and then suddenly the new update is available for everybody. So that's also coming. So if you're not on Slack, I recommend getting on Slack, and also recommending joining the Microsoft Office channel just to be ahead of the game on this stuff, because it's a very exciting seeing everybody work with Paul and Microsoft one-to-one, essentially. We have direct line to the vendor, and as a result of our testing, complaints, and bitching, things get changed. And it's been like almost immediately. Like all the stuff happening with the volume license installer, it's been like 3 months. So, and everything took off really fast when Paul Bowden joined the channel, and it's been great. Incidentally, I think Paul is actually going to be on the Twin Cities MacAdmin meetup, which is actually happening tonight. I think they're an hour behind us. So when we're done here, maybe we can chime in and take a listen. So, come on. Okay, and we're going to talk about the MacKeeper breach. So everybody knows what MacKeeper is, right? It's a piece of shit, right? So, but they had a breach, where basically their database server or servers was configured to be open up to the internet. And a intrepid security researcher discovered this and made them aware. Supposedly they patched, but for a brief moment, 13 million usernames and passwords were available to anyone on the internet. I think the also other thing was that there was no password associated with the database, so you could just go in and just basically...
It was longer than a brief moment. It was known for a brief moment that they were exposed to the internet. It was a very long moment.
Oh yes, it was like, yes. It's like they only discovered, it's been open for like ever, but it's only discovered to be open very shortly. And they closed it pretty quickly.
All the passwords were hashed with MD5 as well.
Right.
So easily reversible.
Yes. So, yeah, so it was a bad scene. It still is a bad scene, but it's MacKeeper. They say it was closed, and MacKeeper's parent company said that no financial information was stored on those servers. But again, it's MacKeeper, and they're shady altogether, so who knows? And since this happened, there's, if you were in the security on the MacAdmin security channel on the MacAdmin Slack, some people who were poking around the installer, trying to figure out what it does, and trying to figure out where all the downloads are coming from. Not sure if anything is going to come of that yet, other than now that we have a couple of domains and websites we can block at the firewall level. But beyond that, yeah, the installer is not really an installer, and it's a couple of things. But if anybody has MacKeeper, that's pretty much how I feel, how we all feel. So, and yep, and I think that's it. I'm done. So, all right. So I guess when you're ready, we'll have Jesse talk about the mysteries and wonders of awk. So, and cool.
And then if you want
Yep.
to plug that.
Yep, we'll switch it up. So,
I'll not be getting up front for this because I'm just going to be typing a lot, so it's not particularly
okay.
conducive. Thank you. Cool. So forgive me because I will be kind of winging this. I started to put together like an actual presentation, and I got about 1.5 slides into it, and I was like, this is going to be probably like a month of work to like convey the information in a way that doesn't involve me just continually leaving to go into the terminal. So instead, we're just going to kind of work our way through it and get increasingly complex as to what you can do with it. Because one of the fun facts about awk that not a lot of people realize is that it is a Turing-complete language. So technically speaking, you can do whatever you want with it. It is not fun to do whatever you want with it, but it's immensely capable. So I guess we'll first kick off with the primary thing that we should know about. And I'm going to start off really simple just because I don't know everyone's familiarity with the command line. I know for a lot of people it's a copy-paste zone where you just like hope that whatever you're pasting in there does the thing that you're expecting. So it's important to discuss, and I'll show like the one slide that I made, the pipeline, right? So one of the things about Unix that's really awesome is this idea of a pipeline, okay? And a pipeline is literally when people tell you to pipe something to something else, it's that vertical bar that you use in your command line. And the whole idea behind it is we have a ton of teeny programs in Unix that do very specialized content, and then pipe just takes whatever that thing spits out and then shoves it into the next thing, right? So a common sequence that you might run through is cat grep sort unique, where I cat the contents of a file. I want to find lines that match a specific value, and that's what I'll use grep for. And then I'll say sort it, and then run unique, and that'll just return only the unique entries that match what I'm looking for, okay? So that's your standard process. The thing about the pipeline, though, is it can be pretty easy to just start stringing as many things together as you can think of to solve a problem. And grep is one of those things where people really start to get a bit pipe heavy and just keep piping to grep and piping to grep and trying to get different content, where awk will actually solve your problem really easily. So they both use something called regex, though, or regular expressions, to find your content. But do you guys have much familiarity with creating regexes, or is it one of those things that you like Google and then figure out? Because here's the thing, almost nobody is amazing at regex. Like regex is one of those things that like you have varying levels of how much Googling you have to do to solve your problem. But anyway, both awk and grep use regex. So let's talk about like a scenario where we might use grep to solve a problem, and then we'll encounter the difficulty that goes along with that, and then show how awk is superior to it. So a simple example would be in the case of running diskutil cs list on this computer. Let me load this down here. So we can see some information about my disk here. So let's imagine that I needed to erase an encrypted external volume programmatically on a group of people's machines. At my company, we do encrypted time machine volumes. So I need to be able to, if I have to like restore a time machine, I have a script for finding that time machine volume, destroying the time machine volume, and then recreating the time machine. So to delete a core storage volume, you need the logical volume group identifier to be able to do it. So the command you end up running after you have that is diskutil cs delete, and then you would paste this in, this number up here, and that would destroy that volume, and then you would have an untitled volume that you could then work with. So one thing that you can do is you can say, okay, I know that I'm looking for the line that has logical volume group in it, okay, or lines that have logical volume group in it. So I can do, in this case, disk-util CS list, and then I can pipe that to grep. And grep lets me just type in any search query that I want, and it'll only return lines that match it. So in this case, I do grep, and then I'll do logical volume group, case sensitive, and it returns the one line that I want. But if I want to use this as like a variable, what I really need is just the last word in that line. And this is where a lot of times you'll find solutions on the internet that say, run this, and then pipe that to awk, and then you do some magic with curly braces and the word print, and you get your final thing. The reality is, though, that awk already does all the stuff that grep does, so this is entirely unnecessary. And we'll get into situations where it becomes like important that you use awk over grep. This is more like one of those pedantic things that I get annoyed about. But you'll see this constantly. Apple has documentation that has grep before awk. Jamf has documentation that has grep before awk. There is almost no situation that I can conceive of where you need to do that or where it is preferable. Because if you're calling the application already, you're invoking it. So you might as well just use the one that works. So the alternative that we can do here is if we run, instead of using grep at all, we are going to pipe to awk, and then the syntax in awk is that I can add my matches inside of forward slashes. So I can now just type logical volume group inside of slashes. I still use that print NF. $NF means the last word or the last column, and I'll talk about columns in a second, in a line. And this will just, in a single invocation, pull out exactly what I'm looking for. So the question is, what is awk doing that grep isn't doing, right? And it's really simple. Grep checks every line to see if it has a thing that matches what it's looking for. And if it does, it returns that line, okay? There are a bunch of options that you can do. You can tell it to return any line that doesn't match things. And you can use some simple regexes to say if it matches this or it matches this. But the moment that you say that I want it to match this or this, but not this and not this, you start piping grep to grep, right? And you start stringing things out really quickly. So awk treats everything as though it is similar to a CSV. It'll split everything by spaces by default. You can change what it splits by, though, by changing the delimiter, okay? So when you look at any row of content, I could say, so if I do, let's see here, we'll do disk-util CS list again here, disk-util CS list. If we look at this content, and let's say that I wanted the word volume in the first line for no apparent reason, I just needed that, or let's say I need the second word from every line, I can actually say, disk-util CS list, awk, then I say print 2. And print 2 literally says for every line that matches, and since I didn't give it a term to look for, it's actually just going to be every line. It'll print the second word from every line. So in this case, that's obviously really stupid, but there are places where it becomes really useful. So one of the documents that I'm going to be coming back to a fair bit is I have all of the Q logs that I pulled from our asterisk server for the past month at my work. And I was asked at one point to figure out how much time every user spends logged into the phone queue, how frequently they are available to answer the phones, okay? So I'm going to show you what the phone queue looks like, and this will give you a good idea of how annoying the problem is to solve, and then I'll show you how I ended up doing it with awk, which is one of those things where you can also do it with Python, and I ended up doing it with Python a bit later. But there was, for different reasons, I needed to specially format it and like get it in like a really pretty version to email. So I had to get fancier, but I was able to solve it with awk in about a couple hours. Pretty straightforward, so that it just spit out all the numbers. Anyway, so this is what the queue actually looks like. Let me increase the size here for you guys. So, in general, it is stream of everything that's going on. So I have to figure out for every user, like here is user 1, okay? So this setup between these two pipes is when what the user is that's doing this. Add member means they've joined the queue. Remove member means they've left the queue, okay? And then there's a ton of stuff that I don't care about. I'm not looking at how, like connect is when they've actually connected to somebody to make a phone call. So I've got a ton of content that I don't care about. What I really need to do is for every individual user, find out when they connect, when they disconnect, figure out the time between those two times, and then total all of those and get the total amount of time that they spend in queue. So like looking at that problem, it would sound like you would have to write some sort of complicated bash script or a more like using Python. Because anytime you get into real text manipulation, Python immediately becomes my first recommendation. But luckily, this is surprisingly simple to solve with awk. It looks like gibberish if you have not done awk before. Okay, it's going to look like garbage. I'm going to show it to you. But I promise you, it's actually immensely straightforward and logical. And we'll build out the whole process for doing that. So here is my little cheat sheet of a couple of lines that I already worked out so that I don't have to, fat finger my way through everything with you guys. So this line here and this line here, when piped into each other, will return a list. And I'll show you what it looks like here. So if I run this hideously long-looking thing in terminal, that's the entire queue. It ran through 4 files of queues, gives me 1 month's worth of data and the total amount of time that each person spent available on the phones, okay? And it's 2 awk statements. And I'll get into why it has to be 2 awk statements in a second. But the first thing I want to bring up is how this is possible based on 2 factors. One is really powerful logic for your regular expressions, for what you're searching for in a line, which means I can say that it needs to match these 2 things but not match this thing, or it needs to match this thing or this thing. You can string those together. And the other thing is that you actually have the ability to have multiple delimiters. So I can say that I want to split on every instance of any number of characters that I want. So if you look at a piece of text and you find that you need to get a word in a specific case where a different delimiter would help you, you can do that. And I'll show you the reason I have 2 delimiters in this one is if you look at this, obviously I want to split on the pipe because that's where all of my data is broken out until I get to the username where I would get usernames back that were SIP/username, right? And that would be unhelpful to me. It'd be way more helpful if I also split on that slash, and then it's essentially like I'm shoehorning a new column in there, and then I can just grab the username by itself, okay? So you can string as many delimiters together as you want. And the other thing is that you can have variables and if-else statements in awk. Like I said, it's Turing complete. So you can build logic into your search, which makes things immensely useful. So the simple example I'm going to give that is not a useful example, but illustrates things pretty clearly about how variables work, is looking at just regular disk-util lists. All right, let's imagine for some reason I needed to get the line that comes after EFI. Okay, so right here it says this is the EFI partition. I just need to figure out, I need to see the text that comes after that. Okay. Now, obviously, this would be more useful if I was doing this for a large quantity of information, or I needed to get it from a large number of machines. But I know that the line comes after a specific one that I'm looking for, but I can't guarantee that it's going to match a regular expression that I want. Okay, I can definitely match the line before what I'm looking for, but what comes after it, I'm not 100% sure. An example, actually, that is useful now that I think about it, disk-util CS list. Is I know the logical volume group but I don't know the name of that volume, right? So I might be looking for something where it is logical volume group, but I need to know that, and I realize that's actually stupid and doesn't make any sense either. So I'm gonna go back one. Anyway, oops. So to do this with awk, I can match EFI really easily, right? So I type in diskutil list pipe, and I type in awk. And we discussed already that if I want to match, I start with single quote, and I, inside of slashes, make what I'm looking for. And in this case, it's going to be EFI. This is also case sensitive. Also, the more specific you can be, the better. In this case, I'm not 100% sure if that is a space between those two things or a tab between those two EFIs. I can test it really easily, though, by just running this once and seeing what happens. So I'm going to just match on this and say print, right? So everything that goes between these curly braces is my command, what I want it to actually do after it's finished matching content. And then I have to close it out with a single quote. And okay, turns out it is a space character, fantastic. So I know pretty definitively that I'll always get that line because I've matched as much of it as I can. If it were just EFI and somebody happened to name a volume EFI, I might get 2 results back. So the more specific you can be, the more guarantee the bigger a guarantee you can get that you'll be getting the results you want. So I want to get the line that comes after it. So the cool thing about awk is that I can say on my first match that it sets a variable to a value, and then I can have an if statement in there that looks at that value and says if that value is true, right? I want to print this line and then stop everything that I'm doing. So never print if it's at 0, then print if it's at 1, and the only time that it would switch to 1 is on this match. And I'll show you what that looks like, because I know it sounds really weird when I just say it out loud. So I'm going to do this. We'll copy this and take a look at it quickly. So this is actually what the line will look like. Can you guys read that okay, or should I make this bigger? Okay, cool. So diskutil list, right? That's just giving me this output that we already discussed. Awk, I'm matching EFI. We've learned that I can, oops, I forgot to do that. I learned that if I want to be more specific, I can actually type EFI space EFI. And now I'm actually setting flag equal to 1. Now the cool thing is I actually didn't have to declare this variable at the beginning. I just like made it when it first happens. So I'm saying flag equals 1 when this thing matches EFI space EFI. Okay, and I just chose flag because that's kind of what it's doing. It's signaling that I wanted to start doing something else. Semicolons in awk, just like in most of the bash shells, say that it's moving on to the next statement. And as long as they're in curly braces, they're executed as a part of this match. Okay, so we have this match, and then this is the stuff that gets executed for this match. Okay, I don't have any match between these two, which means any line it's going to try and run this statement against it. So I say next, which just means skip to the next line. You've set the flag, skip to the next line, don't even run this evaluation on it. Now we get to the next line. The next line is not going to match EFI space EFI because it says Apple Core Storage Macintosh HD. There's nothing in it that would match it. So the awk line ignores setting the flag again, and it goes to the next statement. And the next statement says, very straightforward, if flag is 1, and for those who don't do much programming, oftentimes a single quote means I'm setting my variable, and a double quote means I'm evaluating it. So if I say equals 1 with a single equals, I'm saying flag is now 1 no matter what. If I say flag equals 1, it's saying does flag equal 1? So if flag equals 1, and we put our statements inside of parentheses here, print, and then flag equal to 0 again. And the benefit to setting flag equal to 0 again is it will not print anymore, and since there are no more lines that say EFI in them, it just won't print anything ever again until it gets to the end of the document, right? So when I run this, it prints out Apple Core Storage Macintosh HD. So I get my value after that. Analysis. And this is where things get really useful, again, for log plots. Looking at logs and you want to parse through an entire system log, where you're looking for very specific entries, awk is phenomenal for handling that content and presenting it back to you in a human readable format. grep is faster a lot of times. It might spit back information really quickly for you, but you still have to do some sort of human readable work to it. For example, with my log file that I showed you guys here, yeah, I could just grep out anything that matches the user's name that I'm looking for, and it would clear out a ton of stuff for me. And then I would have to manually do some level of math or continue processing it one after the other. But awk allows me to start processing it as it goes along. So let's dig into the actual problem of figuring this out. And a lot of this comes down to just regular logic. The cool thing about this sort of stuff is it's more algorithm than it is programming. And if you can, and by algorithm, I really just mean thinking out how you would solve the problem if you had to do it manually, right? And that makes things easy because I will tell you right now, awk is one of the most Googleable items that you will deal with because a lot of people struggle with it, which means a ton of people share as much as they can about it. Yes?
How different is the Mac version and the Linux version?
You will rarely, here's what'll happen. You'll come across something and almost always they talk about GNU awk versus regular awk. There are a couple of extra features that are nicer in new awk, but you just have to Google like one more time. I have not had it turn into an issue for me where I haven't been able to solve a problem because I've only been able to find GNU awk answers for stuff. Anyway, I should also mention before we get into this too deeply, you can use bash variables in awk, but the syntax is mildly weird. You have to stop your quotes to get to them. So as an example, let's say that instead of setting flag to 1, I wanted to set flag to something else that was in my script that I had stored in a variable called, just $flag. I would have to type close that statement with a single quote, then type my variable, then start it back up again. And it just strings that stuff together. Okay, but you have to do it outside of the single quotes because otherwise it will not expand that and it will just treat it as literally the text $flag, which is interestingly enough a nonsensical regex. But anyway, so let's look at the problem that we have to solve here. So breaking down this log, our first entry here is the time that this entry happened in epoch time, which 9 times out of 10 is annoying. In this scenario, incredibly useful. And I'll explain to you why in a minute. So that's our epoch time. Next to it, this is a randomly generated call ID that Asterisk does that uses the epoch time as a portion of it, right? So I believe it comes down to like these numbers here afterwards are just kind of randomly generated to some degree, but the primary time up front, that's for the actual call itself. So you'll see they get referenced multiple times in a row because they all pertain to the same call action. This is what queue things happen in. We have 3 queues: support, service, and support, sales, and invoice. I know at my company that people are always in all 3 queues or not in any queues. So I can just choose whichever one of those to look at and ignore the other ones, right? They're all representative of each other. Then it's the user, and then it's the action that's occurred, okay? And in awk, this would be $1, $2, $3. Technically, until I talk about delimiter again, $4, and then $5, but it's going to be $4, 5, and then 6. So the solution that I came up with from an algorithm standpoint is really straightforward. Epoch time, in case you don't know, is the number of seconds that have passed since the Unix epoch, okay? Which is a date in 1979?
1970.
1970, there we go.
I think it's January.
Yeah, but I think it's also a not specific time of day, or is it GMT Yeah, whatever. Either way, this is the number of seconds that have passed since then, which for telling time is really, really annoying, but for calculating the time between two times is phenomenal because you can just subtract any two epoch times and get the number of seconds between them, okay? So if I take the later time and subtract the earlier time, I get the number of seconds that have passed between those two times. So imagining that I can log into a queue and log out of a queue, I can actually treat every login, because a login has to come before a log out, right? I can't be in the queue before I'm out of the queue. Every login is a negative number, every log out is a positive number, and as long as you're one person, I can just add all of those numbers together and it gets me the total number of seconds that you spent in the queue, okay? So that's one of those things where like, I was like, how am I going to solve this? How am I going to solve this? And then I realized that if I just treat all the logins as negative and everything else as positive, I don't have to do any work. It's phenomenal. So you just, my goal is I have to check if it says add member, I need to subtract that value. And if it says remove member, I add that value, okay? So if I do that for an individual, then I'll get their total time in queue. Problem is, all of this crap is mixed together, right? So I can't just say, yeah, like run through and add and subtract. That would be the cumulative for everybody spending time in queue, and that doesn't help anybody. So how do I look at one user and just calculate their time in queue? Well, the problem with that is I need to know every user to do that, right? I have to find all of the users and then run it against each of the users. I can't do that all in one go because I don't know who everybody is. I don't want to have to rewrite my script just because a new hire started and I didn't include them in what I was looking for. So the first part that I broke out is this one. Okay, so this is a command, and I'll show you, and we'll discuss what it's actually doing here. I'm going to remove the unique off the end for right now, just because it's bothering me. I'll remove the sort as well. All right, cool. So first part, awk. Obviously, we're using awk. All right. Now, awk, we've been piping things to it previously. You can also use it just like you do with grep, where at the end of all of your stuff, you just give it a file, and it'll read that file instead. So the last thing in here, I'm saying, look at all of the files that start with qlog in my qlogs folder, okay? So we're saying, awk, look at all these files, and then stuff in the middle is do this stuff too. So -F, and as case sensitive as many flags are, is how I set my delimiter, because that makes plenty of sense instead of D, but whatever. So -F, you then give it a regex or a single value between two single quotes to tell it what it's looking for. So I do a regex here, and in regex, if you do braces and put items in it, that means any of these, okay? It means this or this or this or this. So you could string as much crap as you wanted between those two brackets, and it would split on all of them, and you'd end up with as many columns as you want. So in this case, because we already looked at it, I need to split on pipe, but I also need to split on slash. By the way, can we all talk about the fact that wiggle mouse is the greatest feature that has ever been created? It's phenomenal. Anyway, whenever people at work ask me what they're getting with El Capitan after I force them all to upgrade, I'm like, shake your mouse. And then they're like, oh. Anyway, so we need to split on that as well. So I'm saying split on slash and pipe. Okay, really simple. Next, we do an open quote and we start and the things that I want to ignore. In this case, I actually have more things that I want to ignore than I want to look for. For some reason, I decided to do all of the ignores instead of specifically matching the lines that say add and whatever, but who cares? So looking at that, I'm saying that I don't want it to grab any lines that say enter queue or ring no answer. And I'm designating that with my first match, I put a exclamation point in front of it. Anytime you have an exclamation point in front of one of these matches, it says not to match that. So I can literally say, don't match abandon, and don't match configure load, and don't, by the way, there's no U in that word, which really ruined me for about 30 minutes until I realized that I was auto-completing in my head. So, and don't match enter Q and don't match Q start, okay? So I'm saying,
Out of curiosity, where you have the exclamation point for abandoned inside?
no, it's actually just, there's no space between it because I made a typo, but it still runs.
Okay.
White space doesn't mean anything really, but it's all of them happen inside of the full set of single quotes, okay? So I then say print 5, because if we look back at my document here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and since I'm also splitting on this, 5. So this line's only purpose is to spit out all the users. Here's the problem. If I spit out all the users like this, it literally gives me every line what user is in it. So a great trick, if you don't already know about it, is sort and unique. You need to use them together because unique, I'll show you what unique does. You'd think you just run unique, but unique still gives you crap answers because unique's only purpose is if lines in a row match each other, turn them into one. Okay, so by stringing sort and unique together, I'm saying sort everything alphabetically, and then make everything unique concatenated down, and that will yield my users, right? Of course, it's in absolute order, which really bothers me, but whatever, we all understand. This is still technically alphabetical order. So these are all of my unique users. I need that set of values before I can start processing the information. So this is my one awk statement that gets piped into the next one. So I have a problem though, which is I can't just pipe a crap ton of stuff at awk like this to use as a match, right? I need to take this content and then have this be its match. So I could save these to variables and then call that variable, but this is where something really useful comes into play, which is xargs. Have you guys used xargs at all? So xargs' whole purpose is phenomenal. It takes an output like this, and it lets you run concurrent versions of the next thing using a variable that is equal to each one in that line output, right? So I can actually blast all these users at xargs, and in this case, it will run 24 concurrent awk strings and then spit out all of my answers, okay? So this is one of the most useful things that you'll use. I do not know as much about it as I would like to. It's one of the things that you can get like really clever with. I know how to do the one thing that I always use it for, which I think describes a huge portion of what we do. But I'll show you how xargs works. Xargs, the way we use it is we say xargs, uppercase I, and then I do curly braces open and close. And what this allows me to do is I can place those curly braces open and close right after each other any place in whatever I use after this, and it will just shove each of those variables into it, right? So I can use it multiple times, and the first time that it goes through, it'll use the first thing that it receives, run it, then I'll use the second thing, and I'll drop it into every instance that happens, and then so on and so forth. So in this case, I'm really just gonna pipe the output of what we just did into this, and then start a new awk statement. You just do xargs in that, and then you start whatever your regular line would be, okay? This is one of those things where you might not be thinking of it right now, but I guarantee at some point in the past you came across something where this would have been immensely useful, and I promise you now that you know that it exists, you will definitively be like, oh, I need to Google that again so that I can use it. So I'll show you what we do. And again, I'm splitting these into their constituent parts just because it's a really long awk statement. So I'm going to remove the xargs from the front of it, but we'll still mention when it comes up. So in this case, again, I'm splitting on that slash end pipe, okay? And we get to the front here, and I'm setting sum to 0 at the beginning. We have two flags that we can use in awk. We have begin and end, which are things that happen before it starts processing everything, and something that happens at the end. So if you wanted to actually just throw a header line into what you're outputting and a footer line into it, you can literally say begin print created by Jesse Shipley, then match whatever lines you want, and then end, print, done, whatever you want. And it'll do that, and then all of its work in between. In this case, I'm starting at 0, right? So I'm setting my variable begin sum equals 0. And I'm looking for lines that match whichever name I'm on, right? So I just have my double curly braces in there, and that actually just will fill in whichever name user we're on. So we're finding lines that match that, and they match support, which is, I'm just looking at one of the queues. Remember, we have support, sales, and invoice. I don't care. I'm just picking one. I'm picking support. And it matches add member, and putting a pipe in the middle here in regex means or. So it matches add member, or it matches remove member. Okay? So in this case, because if I didn't and there, it would be looking for a line that had both add member and remove member in it, and that is not going to occur ever, and it'll get no results. So I'm saying it's this user in the support queue. It's like clue. It was this user in the support queue with add member or remove member. Okay? So that's going to return a bunch of lines for me. That's going to return that user's line and then a bunch of join queue, left queue, join queue, left queue, join queue, left queue. I then start my logic. And the logic is actually really, really simple because we already discussed it before. I'm saying if $6 is add member, okay, and $6 is this one, it's either going to be add member or remove member, is add member, then sum minus equals, and for those, again, who don't do a lot of programming or scripting, I could say sum equals sum minus the number, but a lot of programming languages let you just say minus equals, and it infers that you're subtracting that value from it. So sum minus equals $1. So I'm just subtracting the epoch time, okay? So I'm going to get a negative value at first, but in the end, it's going to all come out to being positive. And I say, otherwise, else, sum plus equals 1. And it just runs through the whole thing, and it just categorizes each of those. And then at the end, and this is where awk gets really cool, grep will spit back the lines that it matches. Awk lets you format your lines as well. So you can get a little bit prettier output or more human-readable output. So in this case, I have it say the username, right, because I can use my xargs value whenever I want to, colon, and then when you're typing, that's when you're typing text, by the way, you need to put it in double quotes. The next, I'm actually having to do an arithmetical operation. So I say the variable sum divided by 3600, which is how you turn seconds into hours. And then I just say, again, space hours, and that's put in double quotes. So it's going to give me username colon space total hours spent space hours to designate that it actually is hours, and then output that. So what this all looks like when done together, I can't run that by itself, obviously, because it needs input. But when we do it all together, that's how we end up getting that, right? So it literally just goes through and it sorts all of that. Now, I'll ask you guys, had you been asked to parse through that log file and get this content back, what would your approach have been? Like, do you guys do much programming or Python stuff? Like, Python would be the first thing that a lot of people, I think, would think of if that's the area that they're in. Bash gets really crappy at parsing text like that. It's pretty limited in what you can do for, stringing and formatting like that. Awk is a really straightforward example, and if you look at it, there's not a ton of complexity in what I did. But if I had just shown you that one line to begin with, or if you had Googled and found that as a one-liner, it looks hideous, especially because it's all put on one line. But it allows you a lot of flexibility for parsing through this content. Do you guys have any questions? Because I can tell you more about it, or I can talk a little bit about sed if people are interested. Because sed and awk come up together a lot. It's usually grep awk sed. And the primary difference between sed and awk is that you'll use sed to change text in a file. Okay, It's really great at editing files. You can do it with awk, but it's not as streamlined a process. So an example I'll show you guys here is no, it's under which is okay. So for my tool Deadpool that I wrote, one of the things that I need to do is make sure that if anybody ever runs Jamf Manage on their computer, it edits their Jamf check-in plist again because it'll get set back to the default, and I want it to get forced the way that I have it configured. And the easiest way to do that is to delete 2 lines and change 1 line. And I can do that using sed. And sed works really similarly. It just uses a lot more slashes and a lot more escaping, so it's kind of ugly in its own different way from awk. Awk is very ugly in its own way. But essentially, I say sed -i, meaning that I want to edit the file in line when I'm reading it. And for some reason in OS 10, because of the versioning that you use, it needs to be -i and then just 2 single quotes. I don't know. This is the only way.
I found a good explanation for that.
Yeah, I legit can't find an explanation for it. There are other versions of sed every place else where you can legitimately just run sed-i and inline edit whatever you want. The version in OS 10 requires single quotes after 2 of them. So whatever, deal with it. I then say -e, which is telling it that I'm going to be performing using an expression to make a change. And the standard change process for sed is s/ my match that I'm looking for / what I want it to be. So change and then /g. This is how I would modify something. So in my example that I have here, I'm saying find the line, and this is, it gets ugly because I have to use some special characters. Find the line that says, and this is how I get around, by the way, the change in location for Jamf, /, and to use a slash, I have to escape it by using, so I can't use / without putting a * in front of it, so it has to know that I mean this explicitly. And then **. ** in regex means any character, and star means repeating, okay? So essentially it'll say any character repeating until it finds the next portion of my string that I'm looking for. So I'm saying /.star/ Jamf, okay? So it's looking in a file, and it doesn't care where Jamf is located. As long as it's a file path that ends in Jamf, that regex will find it. And then it changes it to / I have to escape it again, bin/sh, because I'm having to perform a shell script instead. And the G tells it that it's going to replace that. Okay, so it makes that a modification. The next thing is I want to delete the line that says random delay seconds. And the cool thing about this is I can literally just say / my match and a D after it for delete, and it'll delete any line that matches that, right? Which is really, really useful for cleaning crap out of a file. And then the next one is 300/D. That's the amount of time that Jamf waits between check-ins. You have to put a -e between every one of those so that it knows that those are individual expressions it's looking for, or you can actually just run sed repeatedly in a row, but there's no reason to call it more than one time, and you just sort of go through that. But it really all comes down to using regexes to solve your problems. There's some tools out there that you can look up. I forget which one I used. There's some tools for like a playground for working with regular expressions, where essentially you can paste text below it and then just start typing regular expressions above, and it will live highlight what's going on beneath it. It's a really useful way of getting better at them. It's important to also keep in mind, by the way, with awk and with regex, there are diminishing returns on using it, solely in the category of if anybody else has to change what you've done, they need to know a fair amount of what's going on. It can be difficult to just look at somebody else's awk script and catch on to the problem that they're solving. Comments are very, very useful for this. You can escape out lines in, you can break lines out in awk, essentially, where you put a backslash at the end of your line and hit return. You can type a comment and then move into the next portion of it. If you want to make it cleaner, you also can actually make awk scripts by themselves as a file. They start with a shebang that's pound, so an interrobang, or no, well, it's a shebang / awk dash lowercase f. That lets it know that it's going to then read this incoming file as awk script. I don't do that as much personally because I try not to build an immensely long awk scripts. But if your regexes are really, really precise, they can be kind of hard for other people to read. So use it sparingly, but really do think about how to use it because it'll solve problems for you that would take significantly longer. So we saw, I'll actually show you. So we saw that one two-part awk that I made, right? That is technically still just one line. I told you I had to reformat things based on two reasons. One, for pretty formatting something, and two, there's a bug in our asterisk server that allows people to sometimes log in when they're already logged in, and it's one of those things where it's like it happens like once a month, and it's enough to make it so I get negative values back. It's really annoying. So I ended up doing that same thing in Python. So I'll show you again. That amount of text did the entire thing, and then the Python solution was, hold on a second. Oh yeah, this is the Python solution. Okay. And in this scenario, what I ended up having to do is I had to import date time because I needed to work with the Unix epoch time to make some adjustments. Open the files, go through, find all the users, and then for each record in the queue log, I had to split the same way that I was doing in awk so that I could find the usernames, and then if add member is in the record and the team member in queue is equal to false, then we subtract these values. Essentially, this took a lot longer than the awk script did, and they technically do the same thing. So awk is cool. Play with it, Google around with it. If you find yourself using more than one grep to solve a problem, maybe there's a good awk that'll do it for you. But of course, at the end of the day, whatever works, works, I guess. Just don't grep before awk. There's really no reason. Questions? Cool. I know that was super boringly dense, densely whatever, but nothing like watching a guy type for, how long was that? 30 minutes? 40 minutes? An hour? I don't know, whatever it felt like.
That was great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is one of those things I always wanted to know.
Yeah. Also, if you're on Slack and you're trying to solve an awk problem, you just message me, and I'll simultaneously explain it, but probably just end up doing it for you, which is a problem I have.
Just go into Slack and say it's not possible to do this.
Yeah, it's dangerous because then you get too many responses.
Yeah. I was with the spoiler.
So
I'm going on Wednesday.
Go tomorrow.
Brave.
I'm going to the Regal Premium Experience Theater in King of Prussia. Assigned seating. That's the key.
That is
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
Right? I can't believe I'm next to assigned seating.
because of the movie coming out, we're gonna do a little trivia contest.
Question. I did not look at the questions and answers key. Am I allowed to participate, or am I still?
Since you're part of the group, the leadership group.
I also didn't put the answers in the doc.
I was about to say there were no answers.
I could have Googled.
Yeah, you could have.
So I've got some paper and some pens here. So everybody who ends up here, write your answers down. So I got 3 prizes. Grand prize is the bag. It's a vintage 2014 Penn State MacAdmins bag.
Wrote that.
And inside is some other goodies as well.
I wrote the question, so.
Yeah, I'm sure they got papers as well, so. All right. Yeah, sure. As soon as everybody has a pen, we'll start off.
Yeah, I didn't come prepared.
Oh, yeah.
Not Scantron.
So,
I wrote the question, so. There you go.
I'm not actually Star Wars related or Mac.
this is Star Wars trivia. So, we limit it just to the movies.
The Timothy Long book.
No, EU does not count. Legacy EU is not included, so.
They killed that cannon, man.
Yep, so we're not taking, the questions will not involve anything from there, but we'll pull from mostly the movie canons and as well as some of the other media stuff. So, all right. I had to, sorry. All right. So, this is our all right, so first up, what is the name of the first planet destroyed by the Death Star?
It's cheap for me.
You have to know how to spell it.
No.
You have to know how to pronounce it. And you spell it like you say it. It's mostly phonetic.
Mhm.
All right.
I'm disappointed you do. It's a huge.
Name 3 of the bounty hunters summoned by Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back. One of them should be really easy.
Partial credit.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes.
I have no idea.
Are you ready? The next one?
Yeah, I've definitely heard it.
I feel like you're stereotyping nerds, expecting such specific.
You're gonna circle back and forth.
Sure. What is the name of the diner that Obi-Wan visits for information about exotic weapons in the Attack of the Clones?
I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about the movies that matter.
Oh yeah, there was a diner.
Yeah, it was.
Was the big fat guy or something?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Don't remember the name.
Something about midichlorians.
McClurry Diner, that's what it was.
I think the diner was on Coruscant.
I think so.
Makes sense.
What is Luke's call sign at the end of A New Hope, or the original Star Wars movies for purists? Okay, where did three C-3POs line, "We seem to be made to suffer, it's our lot in life," come from?
His internal speaker system.
Is it like the episode or like literally where he was?
Where did the line originated from?
Yes. To be more specific, where
Yes.
where did the
The writers
that-
take that from.
yeah, where did the writers take that from?
Next, who was Leia's adoptive father?
If you got the first question, you can cheat.
right. Who was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan? Yes, Anakin Skywalker had a Padawan.
Thank you.
Okay, next. How did Lando Calrissian save the rebel fleet once the second Death Star revealed its functional weapon systems at the end of Return of the Jedi? Magic is not acceptable.
I don't know any of these. I did spend a weekend at Skywalker Ranch once, though.
I'll give you bonus points for that.
I have a Skywalker Fire and Rescue hoodie. They have their own fire department, and it's a
Yep.
Millennium Falcon flying out of a fire municipal.
Nice.
You gotta have a ticket from the speaker.
So, next, what was the filming site for the base on Yavin 4 at the end of New Hope? What location is that referenced? What real-life Earth location did they use for the base at Yavin 4? Okay, and what movie is the plot of A New Hope lifted from almost directly? What other movie did George Lucas rip the plot off from? And last is our bonus question, which will be the tiebreaker in the event of a tie. So, who was the Imperial officer who led the assault on the base on Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back? The name of the officer, not the name of the actor. All
Is
right.
he the one who also helped uncover the Ark of the Covenant?
Yes. Very famous actor. I think he's currently on Game of Thrones.
Is he? Old dude?
Myself.
Yeah. He does not look good.
Okay.
This isn't looking good.
If you don't get at least 5, you actually have to quit your job.
All right. Okay. So I'm just going to read the answers from here. So,
Yeah.
So be sure to score your own, honestly. So,
0. 100%.
so question 1. What is the name of the first planet destroyed by the Death Star? And the answer is Alderaan, with 3 A's.
Not in a row.
So, yes. So if you have Alderaan, that is correct.
These are not the same.
Okay. 3 bounty hunters from Empire Strikes Back. So, Boba Fett, obviously. So, IG-88, that was the droid. Bosk, that was the lizard guy. Dengar, I think he was the guy with all the wraps.
Yep.
Did they actually use the names in the movie?
They're
No,
credited.
They're credited.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
So you have to be really cool.
Yeah.
so Zuckus, I forget which one he was.
Founder of Facebook.
That's right. And Forlong,
which is the mantis-looking one.
oh, the mantis looking one. Okay. All right. So if you have 3 of any of those, then you get it. That's right.
No,
So.
no.
Apparently in IG-88, there were Shadows of the Empire, which is now not canon.
So what is the name of the diner that Obi-Wan visits? And the answer to that is Dex's Diner. So, and what is Luke's call sign? That's Red 5. Leia's, where did the C-3PO's line come from? And that was
down here at the bottom.
okay.
Last one.
You don't know these by heart?
No, I don't know this. This is one of the ones I didn't get. So
This is it's from
it's a line taken from Akira Kurosawa's Seventh Samurai. So
it's spoken by one of the peasants.
yep. Who was Leia's adoptive father? The answer to that is Bail Organa. So
He's in charge of Alderaan, wasn't he?
yes.
So, the King of Alderaan is also the correct answer.
Not a king.
No.
The leader.
So, and actually, no, I think Bail Organa was the senator from Alderaan, not the king.
That was the most Star Wars nerd answer.
Technically.
You were technically right.
Exactly.
Leia was a princess. Yeah, it gets confusing sometimes. So, who was Anakin's Padawan? Now, this answer. Now, if any of you watched the Clone Wars, you would know who this was. This is Ahsoka Tano. Was the answer. So, how did Lando Calrissian save the Rebel fleet? No, I did not know that, but oh yes, by engaging the Star Destroyers and fencing them in. So,
Sounds like a story that he told afterward.
yeah, well, he's good at that. So, what was the filming site based for? What was the real life location that they used as the base on Yavin 4? And the answer is the Mayan site Tikal in Guatemala.
Somebody posted a picture on
Does Mexico count at all?
No.
It's all the same thing.
It's close. I think you're off by a couple hundred miles, but.
South of here.
And what
There's going to
movie?
be a winner, I'll tell you that.
So the answer to what movie is the plot A New Hope ripped off from? And the answer is that The Hidden Fortress by Akira Kurosawa. There is you can sense a theme.
If we put a Kurosawa film, do I get half credit for that?
We'll see how it goes. We'll see how many how hard this trivia was. We'll see that. And the bonus question, the answer to that one is oh yes, Admiral Ozzel with 2 Z's.
He had 3 Z's.
Right there. Okay, so
Who got more than 3?
Who got any?
I got any.
I-O.
Yeah, I got two and maybe a half.
so off the top of my head, I got 6. So. So I thought it was fine because I got 6. I had no idea that I'm the outlier. So.
See, when we're all chatting about the questions beforehand,
Yes.
and I was like, these are really tough questions. Nice job, Ben. And Serge's like, yeah, I got 6 of them. Like, I know most of those. And I was like, okay, well, maybe they're I'm just dumb.
No.
Just to clarify, by the way, there is no level of not being able to answer these questions that would ever qualify you as dumb. Okay?
Okay, so I guess who had more than 3?
But more than 2, I believe.
Serious.
Is the,
I had 2 in the Kurosawa film. I got that much.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is 2 the most people got, or?
I think I did exactly the same thing. I got Alderaan, and I brought 7 Samurai instead of 10 Fortress because I couldn't remember the name.
I would have had extras, but I just forgot the name.
I have Alderaan and Balagan. So I got 2 straight right.
Okay.
all right, whoever can do the best impression of Jabba the Hutt asking for Han Solo wins. Is my
All right. So,
That sounds good.
well, this was unexpected.
All right. So, you know, I thought this was very good.
None of us deserve any of this.
Well, I'm gonna give them out, so I'm taking this shit home.
Who can tell me the flag that is the flag for setting a delimiter in awk? That person can.
Capital
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Winner.
So, I don't know, we draw straws.
Rock, paper, scissors?
Backup plan.
Yeah, we didn't have.
There are also
Okay.
3 things up there and 3
Yep.
people that got.
Some
So,
right.
yeah, so,
That is true. If you got some right, you win.
right,
Everybody's a winner.
so 3, 2,
I've
1.
got the bag already.
Yeah. I also highly recommend looking into the works of Akira Kurosawa. He's a phenomenal auteur. If you want to get a good sense,
So we're just gonna
check out every frame of painting about Kurosawa.
So in this bag. I'm assuming this is
He's splitting the prizes.
Oh, you want to stick around for prizes?
So
I haven't watched.
first in the grand prize bag, with the grand prize bag is this